Hey,
here we are.
The first week of Doubt questions via Facebook Live.
And you'll never...
Wait, go back. I
What?
like you better as Mickey the microphone.
No one is going to take us seriously.
Look at how the shape of his head matches the shape of the microphone. Pop up. Come up slowly. See? Perfect. Wait, do it again. Wait,
Am I right?
Come up slow.
Come up. Yep.
Look at it. It's perfect.
Oh.
Perfectly spherical head.
And now that we've lost all credibility with anyone who might be watching.
Yes. Okay, so just a few preliminaries for those of you who are joining us a little bit early. We probably want to shut that off.
Oh, the computer's talking.
The computer's talking
There's
to
only
us.
a couple folks here right now, so. Hello, Jolene. Hello, Derek.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. You can still hear me if I mute it, right?
Jolene.
Yeah.
Can they hear us?
Have you ever heard of that particular song when they slow it down?
No.
It sounds like heavy metal. It's like super. It is really cool.
I'll have to check that out. Hey, Mike.
I'm assuming that
Mike's here.
Everybody.
Hey, my
can
sweetheart's
hear.
here. Michelle's here.
Nice. I'm assuming everyone can hear because I muted the computer.
It's French, you know.
So this is before we actually get started. Make sure you share it on your timeline if you'd like. Comment down below. We will try to read them as best we can. And you can do the little emoji thing, thumbs up, like you guys are doing right now. We appreciate that stuff.
I see your smiley face.
Let me see if I can.
Wait, Josh Kelly's here. Hey, Josh.
Uh-oh.
Let me see if
What's up, bud?
Clearly he's on summer break.
Mike. Hey. Ryan's here. Hey, Ryan.
Mary, Poulain. Hey, girl.
Man, Luke's here. Everyone's coming in. Wow, it's getting to be a crowd.
All right.
Hey, come back real quick. One thing you all missed at the very beginning is the symmetry between Jason's head and the microphone. Look, watch. Here he comes. It's perfect.
It's an optical illusion.
And it helps to have a shirt that kind of disappears.
Hey, Jim.
Okay. Can you guys read back there? Because I'm like farther away than you guys are.
A little bit.
He can see it.
It's very
I
small.
can't see it.
But
Right,
I can.
well-
I'm kind of.
The reason why I asked.
90%.
Okay, here's what I'm going to try then. I'm going to
Pull it up on your phone.
I'm going to pull it up on my phone, and hopefully it doesn't screw anything up like last time because I will have.
Well, if you're not on Wi-Fi, be on the LTE. Turn your Wi-Fi.
Hey, thanks,
Yes,
Steve.
that's what I'll
Steve
do. I'll
says
turn off
he
Wi-Fi.
enjoys the series, that it rocks.
That's
All right.
cool.
Glad it's adding value to your life.
I'm getting closer. Hold on. I gotta see the inside.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
You ready to go, JMO?
I think so.
Morris head. Yep. You're right. It's perfect and it's spherical.
How many of you are actually eating while you're listening to this? Quick poll.
Hopefully.
Quick pull.
Anyone? And if you are eating, what are you eating? Let us know. I just had jambalaya.
Yeah.
It was delicious.
I had the gas station chicken.
Yep.
Yeah.
Always
that's
good.
pretty good. We're going to probably talk about that next
On Sunday.
on Sunday.
Just a little bit. Because that's
All right.
pertinent.
All right. So
Okay. So that's working.
JMO now can see the comments.
Oh, and Trudy's here.
hey,
Hi,
Trudy.
Aunt Trudy.
Oh, that's awesome.
She
Aunt
joins us
Trudy?
every morning on Sunday. It's so cool.
Okay.
Yes.
I have not seen any lunch menus broadcasted yet.
No jambalaya.
Yeah, there's probably
They're
a
here
little
to
bit of a
feast
delay.
upon our knowledge.
There's a little bit of a
That's
delay.
overstating it quite a bit.
All right. Okay, here we go. Just started my lunch at work. Good old ham and cheese.
All right.
Ryan.
Excellent.
Ham and
There you go.
cheese.
Enjoy, man.
All right. So if you guys want to post some of your comments or questions as we go through it, we have a few of the best questions that we felt like we could address in a
Really, we
short
got
amount of time.
on this particular topic, 4 questions came in,
Yeah.
and we're going to answer all of them.
I mean, there were a lot
Okay.
more, but they kind of grouped into those four question categories. And so.
Yeah, the other questions that have come in so far apply to the other weeks, so they'll show up in other Facebook Live events.
Right.
So we're not
Exactly.
blowing you off if you didn't get to the question you posted this week, but it will show up later in the series for sure.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. So
Oh, wait a second. Mary's having General Tso's chicken. I love that stuff.
Ooh.
That is good stuff. Enjoy.
Okay, so one of the questions that got posted was, and I want to make sure that I get everybody's name. So this one was anonymous.
Okay.
Was some Christians think doubt is a sin.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any biblical truth to this?
Okay. The thing that pops into my mind first is I think we have to understand what faith is, and the relationship then between faith and doubt. So Jesus highlighted over and over again I guess what you could call sort of the interactive power between himself and the faith of other people. So he would do miracles, and then he would say things like, your faith has made you well. Go in peace, right? And there would be times where certain towns, like Nazareth, where he said because of their lack of faith, he couldn't do. Yeah.
Which is funny. He could not do something. I still haven't figured that one out. It's like you have an almighty God that could not do something because of lack of faith. I don't know. That's
an interesting question.
Yeah.
I mean, or was it actually? I'd have to study a little bit more on that. Or was it a would not?
Right.
But the point is, faith has a profound role apparently in the way that the interaction between Jesus and I is impacted. So faith at a base level, it's something you have to place into either an idea, an object, or a person. So we're sitting on these stools. We've placed faith in the stools that they will hold up our weight. And I think having grown up in the church, I think a lot of Christians think, faith is about me placing kind of the weight of my convictions on certain ideas. So it's this sense of like, okay, God is omnipotent, God is omniscient, God is fill in the blank, that there's these certain tenets of the faith, and I put the weight of my conviction on them, and that's my faith. And here in the 21st century, we've got to the point where there's these very kind of comprehensive, detailed, systematic theologies that go into lots of minutia. And so if I give intellectual assent to that and kind of put the weight of my convictions on that, that's faith. Here's another way of looking at faith, though. This is a true story. There's this tightrope walker. His name was Blondin, and he was very popular about 150 years ago. And he decided he was going to walk over Niagara Falls. So it's like 1,100 feet of rope, 160 feet in the air. 100,000 people showed up. You can find pictures of this on the internet. In fact, you should Google it right now and bring them up. And so, of course, he makes it over by himself. Everyone goes crazy. He goes over again another time with a chair, puts the chair, balances on the tightrope, stands on it. That's the picture you can usually find on the internet. Went over another time, made an omelet, actually lowered it down to people in the Maid of the Mist boats below. Went over another.
What, he cooked something then?
Yeah, he brought a little table out that balanced, and he actually cooked an omelet on it. You can find pictures of it. It's out there.
Everybody needs a hobby, man.
He goes over a fourth time with the wheelbarrow. Fifth time over, he says, how many of you think I can take a person in the wheelbarrow? Right? 100,000 people.
Right.
Woo! How many of you are willing to go with me? Hands down. And of course, he had an assistant who had been trained. He'd seen him do it 100 times during practice and had gone over with him. And sure enough, they go over in the wheelbarrow successfully, right? And let me ask you, you think that assistant, when he was going over, was there probably still a sense of uncertainty? Was there probably still a sense of doubt? Was there probably, like this could go horribly wrong? Probably, right?
Yeah.
But at the base level, he had faith, And so when I think about faith, more than having certainty about ideas, I think the most fundamental definition of faith is it's about relational trust. So it's not simply about like holding beliefs that sort of float out in the stratosphere.
That we can argue about.
Right. I think at its core, faith is a belief in a person and trusting this person. And what Jesus is saying, I think when it comes to faith, it's not like, oh, woman that I healed, you had this belief in this esoteric idea that healing could happen if you just were certain enough. No, she actually trusted Jesus. Like she's trusting that Jesus, what he has to say about life and how it works, it will work. And so I think what Jesus is saying is put your trust in me and trust that I actually know how reality works and that I can teach that to you. So at a fundamental level, what I'm saying is everybody has faith.
Right, because everybody listens to somebody.
Yep.
It's like, even someone who's from the atheist side of the spectrum, they believe in what their college professor told them, or they believe in what, Dawkins said or Sam Harris says,
Yep.
or they'll always cite intellectuals or scientists. So in essence, they have faith too, that the other person that they're listening to, it's a relational trust.
It is. Like everybody, I would say everybody's a disciple. Everybody picks who's going to be my teacher.
Right.
And I'm going to trust what they say about reality and how it works. And basically following Jesus means I'm going to go from unbelief to belief in every area of life. Like I'm going to believe what Jesus actually says about money and use my money that way. I'm going to believe what Jesus says about relationships, and I'm going to start to live in my relationships that way.
You said something a couple of times, use the word certainty, and I think that's really important because I think people equate faith and certainty. Versus, so it's like doubt and faith are on opposite spectrums, and faith is synonymous with certainty. And I think, what you're saying is it's a belief, it's a placing your trust in the relationship over certainty about, or
Oh, wow. Yeah.
all of the tenets or whatever that is. In other words, like you can follow Jesus without signing on the doctrinal dotted line about everything, right? You can come after him, you can pursue him, and it's a growing relationship, a growing faith. But I think a lot of time when you talk about the Dawkins or Sam Harris's of the world, they equate it with certainty, but a blind certainty. And I remember hearing Lee Strobel talk about faith once, and he had an interesting definition, which I'm not sure I buy, but he said faith is taking steps in the direction of the evidence. So it's almost like a probabilistic kind of an attitude towards it. And that is to say that it's not a blind faith. It's you're taking steps in the direction of what you progressively know to be true. What do you think about that?
Yeah, the way I think about it is, okay, if everyone it's like a Mr. Miyagi who becomes your teacher. Everybody has to pick who will I apprentice myself to? Who do I believe actually has the best data, information, perspective on how reality actually works? I agree with him. It's like you need to look and go, okay, why would I give Jesus that slot? Or why would I give Richard Dawkins that slot? Or why would I give my mom that slot? Or
Right, you're going to give it to somebody.
Right, and I mean, for me, Jesus just stands so head and shoulders above every other human life and basically every category that you can try to measure that I would challenge anyone to find a better teacher, a better leader to pattern your life after.
So let me play an advocate on the other side of the fence here for a second. If someone says that their faith is in science, in other words, their faith is in a methodology, versus that they believe in, the 5 principles of science, and they follow the scientific method, and people who advocate for things that are naturalistic, versus something that requires faith. How would you respond to that?
Well, obviously,
Supernatural religious explanations.
yeah. I mean, for me, the place I always start is actually what we covered last weekend. It's like, well, we have to go back to Jesus as a historical figure,
Right.
And what can we trust about what's been handed down to us?
But you're talking about history. He's talking about science, though.
Agreed. What I would say is everyone's going to pick an ultimate authority.
Right.
Well,
You've
even in
chosen
the
science, and I respect science. It is definitely an authority in my life, but I have another authority that's higher, and here's why. Because I actually think this is history, and it happened, that Jesus resurrected.
Yeah, but even then, if you're talking about science as a methodology, you're talking about ideas that we can argue about. But even within that realm of the scientific method, nobody is we simply don't have enough time to personally reprove that gravity works a certain way, or that combustion works a certain way, or that the wheel is a feasible means of transportation. None of us go through the painstaking effort of doing all of that R&D all over again. At some point, even within the scientific community,
Yeah, you're still trusting authority.
you're still trusting in what someone says, some scientist says, and that relationship is important.
I think we're kind of getting on a rabbit trail, though.
Right.
Like, I want to come back to that original question, which is like, when does
Is doubt a sin?
So what I was trying to say, let's come back to, like, for me,
It was so much fun to go the other
it
way.
was. But for me, like, the fundamental definition of faith is relational trust in Jesus. So this is kind of an inside baseball question. We're not actually talking about like an outsider's view. It's more like, okay, I'm an insider.
Yeah.
When has doubt become a sin? Well, if faith is relational trust in Jesus, and that I'm going to believe what he says about every area of life, and actually follow him into it, get in the wheelbarrow, right, and trust him. So then the question is, okay, if that's the definition of faith, when is doubt a sin? And here's my take. I think doubt is a necessary part of faith in relationship with Jesus. That in fact, doubt is not a sin in and of itself.
Right.
That it can lead to sin, but that actually doubt is the environment in which faith is meaningful.
Or it can manifest itself.
Exercised.
Yeah. So, like, for example, let me demonstrate it this way. Don't look.
Come on.
All right. All right. This is an experiment in faith, okay? So, I'll ask you, Troy, do you think I have a $20 bill in my hand? Yes or no?
No.
You don't?
I don't.
Okay.
Well, wait. Do you say that you have a $20 bill?
I'm just asking him.
Oh, you're just, okay.
Right.
You're
So anyway, he's exercising faith right now, though, right?
Yeah.
That I don't. See, now I'm going to destroy his faith. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you I have a $20 bill, right? And I've destroyed your faith because now you have absolute certainty.
Right.
Like, you don't need faith anymore. And I think the same dynamic is true in our relationship with God. It's the fact that there is a gap, that I don't have absolute certainty, that there is space for doubt, that allows me to trust and have faith in Jesus. Because if it is certain, faith isn't required. If you absolutely know, no faith is
really
required.
good.
You know? And so I think about it in terms of like
marriage.
Yeah, like my relationship with Michelle. I remember I had a crush on her all through high school. And then she broke up with her boyfriend freshman year of college. I come back that summer, and I just like, it's like maybe my dream can come true, right? It's like I'm spending like every possible moment I can to be near her and around her. But there was also this uncertainty, this insecurity. It's like, I mean, I can tell she kind of likes me, but I don't know if she likes me like I like her. And I think this is like, I'm up here, and she's kind of like at this level of interest. And my buddies are like, just ask her out. And I'm like, man, if I make a preemptive strike too early, it might like, drive her away. And I'm going through this week after week, and finally, she writes me a note, and it was basically to broadcast, go ahead and ask me. It's going to go really well. And then it was like, but I wasn't sure. Like the night of, I'm going to ask her to be my girl. There's still this like, you don't know.
Yeah.
And it's like.
It's always that way.
It is. And I think like dating is like faith in that it's an exercise in strategic uncertainty.
Well,
you know what I mean?
So you're going to ask her to marry you, let's say. And you have some kind of history of a relationship that tells you what her character is like.
Exactly, yeah.
And what you're doing is you're, by faith, trusting that is going to continue on into the marriage relationship. So that step of saying, marry me, we're going to make this, I'm committing to you, is an act of faith based on what you know of her character.
Yeah, and there's always a gap. There isn't total certainty.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that is what creates trust or faith. Like the other option would be, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up hidden cameras everywhere that Michelle goes. I'm going to hire like 6 detectives who follow her and capture every word, so I know absolutely everything and can be totally certain. Right. But that's not a relationship of love anymore. That's like stalking. It's creepy. It's controlling.
And even then, you wouldn't be absolutely certain.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
But even if you're an atheist, committing to any kind of relationship, whether it's marriage or say, hey, we're going to have kids, is got to be a step of faith of some kind. You're trusting that things are going to be the way you hope that they might be.
And I want to read this quote from John Ortberg. This is from his book called No Doubt. And this summarizes it, I think, really well. He says, faith is required only when we have doubts, when we do not know for sure. When knowledge comes, faith is no more. Sometimes a person is tempted to think, I can't become a Christian because I still have doubts. I'm still not sure. But as long as doubts exist, as long as a person is still uncertain, that is the only time faith is needed. When the doubts are gone, the person doesn't need faith anymore. Knowledge has come. This is exactly the point that Paul was making in his first letter to the church at Corinth. He wrote these words, now we see, that's a knowing word, but a poor reflection. In other words, now we still have confusion, misunderstanding,
Right.
doubts, uncertainty, right? Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, again with questions and doubt and uncertainty, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. So I think doubt is a necessary component of relational trust. Like, for example, doubt creates humility. Like, overconfidence in any relationship is dangerous, you know? And I think of, like, people who maybe are more from a, don't take this the wrong way, but, like, people who get, like, prophetic words, more the charismatic kind of people walk around, like, saying, God told me. You know, like there was a woman that was in the last church I pastored who had a prophetic gift and really felt like God was telling her about the future of our church and what exactly was going to happen. And she would say it like, thus saith the Lord, you know? And it was like this overconfidence where you just want to go, you got to back down your certainty at least 20%. Like, seriously. Because there's an arrogance here that you're unaware of that doesn't even make this any kind of pliable conversation. And I think doubt causes that kind of humility and uncertainty, and then that causes us to learn, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
like
even I'm just thinking of, you know, other biblical stories where Gideon, he meets the angel that tells him directly what to do, and he's still doubting. He still doesn't have certainty.
Yeah.
So even in a "Thus saith the Lord" conversation that you find in Scripture, that level of certainty isn't there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's where faith comes in. Now, doubt, I think, isn't sin in and of itself. It's just the environment in which faith happens. But it can lead to sin, because really the essence of sin is, in my book, it's like you go back to the Genesis, you know, and it's Adam and Eve saying, God, we don't believe what you say is right. Like, I'm going to just come up with my own definition of right and wrong. And I supersede you, you know? And so, like, if I get in a situation, just to use the topic of money, Jesus obviously teaches, like, give to the poor. He teaches a life of radical generosity, you know what I mean? And if you really want to know what I believe, not like the public convictions, the things I say out loud, or even private convictions where it's like, I really think I believe this, like Peter's like, I will not deny you. I won't. He really believed he wouldn't. But he obviously didn't believe it. Because a little while later, that conviction is out the window. You know, what we really believe, our core convictions, I think we always live. You are subject to your ideas about how you think life works. So if I want to understand what I believe about money, I just need to look at how I spent my money the last 20 years. And if I haven't given to the poor, if I haven't given money away, I can say I believe in generosity, but I don't believe in generosity.
Talk is cheap.
And what Jesus is interested in is actually changing that mental map of your core convictions, you know? So to have that kind of faith, number one, you have to know what Jesus actually says about a topic, right? And then you actually have to go and do it. So, like, if doubt freezes me from
obedience.
Yeah, if it basically makes, if I sit there and go, I know clearly what Jesus says about this, but because I have doubt, I'm going to choose otherwise.
Right.
You know, then you're getting into pride, then you're getting into arrogance.
Yeah, doubt is leading to sin in that case.
I mean, what do you guys think about that?
Well, I was going to say, for the sake of clarifying,
Yeah.
then what are you getting at with where is the line at which doubt becomes sin?
To me,
Is it because the behavior that follows it?
Well, I'm not sure actually the doubt is sin.
Right.
What I'm saying is doubt can create an environment where either I'm going to choose faith, you know, and say I'm going to trust what Jesus has to say.
That's the dichotomy you're dealing with.
I'm going to trust what Jesus has to say about it and do it. You know what I mean? Or in doubt, I can also go, no, I'm going to do what I think is right. So I know I'm supposed to forgive my enemy. Screw that. I'm going for vengeance.
So when we're faced with doubt, then we're faced with the choice.
Right.
So it's kind of like it's the razor's edge of choice for us. And if we choose to follow Jesus in light of our doubts, or be obedient to God, or however you want to frame that, or we choose to rebel, we choose to follow our nose, we choose to make something else God, right, in light of that razor's edge of doubt. And that's what we're left with. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So would you guys say doubt is sin? Like,
I've never
No.
thought that.
I don't
No.
think so either. I just think it's the environment we live in.
Right.
think
And I
the
think that
choices
God
you make.
even knows that our finite brains couldn't even comprehend it all anyway. So there's always going to be a gap. And he knows that we're dust. And he works with that anyway.
I love the verse that says we are but dust. That's a real verse. I'm serious. Look it up.
Please
We are but
disregard.
dust.
Please
One
disregard
T,
everything
though,
that
right?
Rob has just now said.
Just one T, but still.
No, but I mean, you say like, you face your doubts and you follow through on them. You said something about it's like, I don't understand God. I don't understand my wife, right? I mean, I'm married to her. I love her.
Yeah.
I'm in relationship with her.
We are fearfully and wonderfully made.
But
Yeah.
I don't know her mind. How am I going to know God's mind? And so every day I get up and I walk in faith that she is who she is and behaves the way she does, and that her character is a certain way, and that our relationship is based on my commitment that I chose to commit to her in light of the things I know and all the things I don't know.
Right. And I think if someone is constantly living with this sense, like, if I feel doubt, it's sin, you're going to have this heavy weight of condemnation every day and constantly be trying to muster up this certainty. It's like faith does not equal certainty, is what I'm saying.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
About a set of beliefs. It's about relational trust in Jesus. And I want to grow more and more confident in him each year, because I'm actually obeying and experiencing that fully alive life that
That
comes when we
leads
trust him.
ultimately to action, because even when you look at like that Hebrews, chapter on faith, every single thing that you see is God telling them to do something and they acted on it.
Yeah.
God telling them to do something and they acted on it over and over and over and over and over again. It's like, that's how you really know if you have faith or not, because you don't really know until you're presented with the crucible of doubt at that point.
And even in that moment, like Jesus on a cross dying, it's like, well, your faith didn't work out real well. You know what I mean? It's like you got killed, you got
Right.
crucified,
Yeah.
and we're all in this, trapped in the timeline of our story. And part of faith is trusting, like, when everything is finally revealed.
Yeah, there is a story bigger than
There's a
just
story that's bigger,
Yeah.
and that Jesus is going to basically take us eventually to the place where there's a new heaven, there's a new earth, like everything gets redeemed.
And it's okay that as we're trusting that there is resolution, there's trusting that all the sad things will be made unsad, right, or untrue. At the same time, people should have permission, and I hope that they hear that here today. Is you have permission to doubt, you have permission to vacillate, you have permission to have bad days. It's like the stock market. It's like if you look at your stocks, your mutual fund for your retirement, if you get too close to it, you drive yourself nuts.
It's true.
Because every 15 minutes, it's the whole, I'm going to retire. No, it's a panic attack.
It's true.
But if you step back, you step away from it, and it's like, look, it's kind of all going up and to the right.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like the forest for the trees kind of thing. It's like, and it's like life is a journey. It's
And-
okay to have a story, and the story's going to have conflict, and it's going to be up and down. The tide's going to go in, and the tide's going to go out, and it's okay.
And take, when you're experiencing that, when you have the questions, rather than suppressing them, like the people who are closest to God in the scriptures are the ones who seem to argue with him the most. I mean, if you think about it, it's like Abraham's trying to talk, God into, don't burn this place down. How many people can I get this down to? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's like negotiating back and forth. God, you look at the prophets, a lot of it is them like questioning God. Like, where's your justice? Why aren't you acting? I need an answer here. You know what I mean? And there's a reverence there still. There's a humility there, but they don't suppress the questions. They bring them up out into the surface and hold them before him.
And that's a model for us today.
Yeah.
We spent about half an hour on this question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's go to his.
So
keep
we should
going.
probably keep
Okay,
speaking
so
along.
question 2, but that was a big one. That was a
was.
big topic.
That was our biggest
That's
question.
a worthwhile
All right,
question for
so-
sure.
And that's really the heart of this whole series.
The second question, I think this one was also anonymous. If I need to look into the historicity of Jesus and the Gospels, where do I start to get a well-rounded perspective? Seminary's not a possibility. What do I do?
Well, there's a lot of great stuff that's been written about these things. This isn't new. And I think I remember this particular person saying something about, books like The Reason for God or The Case for Christ weren't going to be enough. I would
So
just...
I will say that, like, those two books that just were named, for example, those are a good place to start. We shouldn't dismiss those.
Yeah.
But I think what this person is saying is, I've read kind of the popular level books. Like you've got the
Like the 101 stuff.
there's like the case for faith, the case for Christ,
The case of the resurrection.
the case of the
There's a lot of
resurrection.
cases out there.
There's the like Lee Strobel's whole series.
Right.
You've got Tim Keller, The Reason for God. What are some other kind of 101 stuff?
So let me come back to that. So
Okay.
like with Keller's book, Reason for God, I would just say this, and for Lee Strobel too, Keller is a really good way of synthesizing a lot of high-level academic information. So he takes a lot of research from a lot of really high-level authors, and he kind of distills it down to a more popular level. Now, if you really want to dig in and get into the weeds, short of going to seminary, and I'm not even sure how many seminaries really get you into some of this stuff, I got 3 recommendations for you that I think would get you far beyond the popular level and really challenge your thinking. One is this book here I brought with me called Lord or Legend. This is by Greg Boyd and Paul Eddy. And it's a really good book.
I own that one.
And it's pretty accessible, not super thick, but deals a lot. It begins talking about manuscript evidence for the New Testament, first century Judaism, a lot of oral argument, how we can trust the oral history, all that kind of stuff. So really good, pretty accessible, but also pretty academic at the same time. Another book that's been written in the last 20 years that is really important and has turned a lot of academia on its head is by a guy named Richard Bauckham, called Jesus and the Eyewitnesses.
And actually, the second edition,
Yeah.
a new edition, like the 20th anniversary edition, just
came out. Yeah, and it's got a lot of response to people's issues with the book as well. So he's kind of addressed a lot of the problems people have addressed his original form in the new book, and it's powerful. It's really, really good. Thirdly, there's a guy, his name is N.T. Wright, Tom Wright, and he is the Archbishop, or was the Archbishop of Canterbury in England, an extraordinary thinker and author, and he wrote probably the most important thing in 100 years on a topic called the resurrection of the Son of God. This is a deep dive. Sure, I mean, it's probably as deep or deeper than you're going to get into with any kind of seminary class. So if you really are if you're a reader and you want to jump into that kind of high-level information and all of the resources that they quote from, all of their footnotes and everything, those are 3 really good resources for you if you want to really jump in that end.
So hit those 3 one more time, because he and I haven't talked beforehand. I would have actually picked the exact same.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So Lord or Legend by Greg Boyd and Paul Eddy. You can get all these things off Amazon if that's your.
Yeah, there's actually Lissa is posting URLs.
Sweet.
Oh, good. Lissa, we love you.
Liz.
So Lord or Legend by Boyd and Eddy. Richard Bauckham, Jesus and the Eyewitnesses. And the cool thing about that book is, in the academic world, New Testament scholarship, that one has really created a sea change in people's thinking. And that's not filtered out to the populace just yet, but it's happening in those circles. And then N.T. Wright's book, The Resurrection of the Son of God, is extraordinary. And it's excruciatingly detailed. So if that is your jam,
Get ready to wait.
you're going to spend a few months in that book alone.
Get yourself a machete.
Yeah.
Get ready to hack a path.
But that's helpful. And
Great. We've got that deepest kind of thing on the website too for this whole series, by the way. So, yeah, that's going to be helpful. So let's hit 3.
Yeah, I don't know if that was very clear. What Jay is saying is, on the website every week, if you look, there's actually resources that are offered, and they're basically categorized by 3 different levels.
Right.
So what's the first one?
deeper, deepest.
Deepest.
Deeper, deepest.
And they tend to cover, go from some more popular to more academic.
Yeah.
So, for instance, on the topic of the resurrection this last week, the 3 recommendations ended with N.T. Wright.
Right.
And began with, I want to say, like Eric Metaxas or something like that. So, just depends on how far you want to jump into that.
Yeah, so anyway, in future weeks, go to the website, you can find that.
Yep. Okay, so number 3, I think Corey submitted this one. In terms of the resurrection, where does the validity of the bloodstained shroud that was found in 2009? How do we have his DNA? How can we clone it? How was this just discovered?
I'll tackle that one. By the way, anytime science and the supernatural can intersect, I'm so fascinated. I'm like, Fringe was my all-time favorite TV show. Fringe Science. Like, yeah. I grew up reading books about Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, all that stuff.
Oh, you're that guy.
I am that guy.
That explains a lot. Yeah.
Twilight Zone was my favorite TV show growing up. So if you're not familiar with the Shroud of Turin, basically it's 14 feet by 3.5 foot cloth, and on it, on the front and rear, there's images of a naked, crucified man. And so it's owned by the Catholic Church. It's at the St. John Cathedral in Turin. That's why it's called the Shroud of Turin. The Vatican won't speak to its authenticity, but basically it showed up in history in the 14th century, around 1355. Some French soldier brought it back. This was a time in history where finding holy icons, there was kind of like a...
So they're looking for it.
It was like the
confirmation
meme.
bias.
The meme, yeah. Find the spear, the lance.
The Grail.
Yeah, find the Grail. Find a piece of the cross. So, and so, interestingly enough, about 30 or 40 years ago, actually the Vatican, there's enough kind of groundswell interest. They actually gave permission to like forensic pathologists and microbiologists and botanists and physicists to actually analyze it. So I have some stuff from a National Geographic article that's pretty interesting. I'll hit some of the highlights here. After they did, so they looked at like this is from Paulio de Lazario, who was one of the leading experts on the project. He basically said this: after they did all the analysis, it was basically a standoff. So he said, it is unlikely science will prove a full solution to the many riddles posed by the Shroud, but there were some very interesting discoveries. So it was like 33 members.
Well, that almost goes, just to put a parenthesis in there, that almost goes to your point that you made in Sunday, is that science can only take you so far. It can prove things about the Shroud, but it can't prove the historicity. You have history, archaeology, all this other kind of stuff that are other domains of knowledge.
Except I just wouldn't put the Shroud
science
anywhere near the same category as what we're getting from the Gospels. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, right.
But this is interesting, all right, because he asked about the blood, so I dug into this a little bit. So they had 33 members in the Shroud of Turin research project. It's called STIRP. STIRP. Oops, excuse me. 33 members from 20 major research institutions. They took 7 tons of equipment with them. They worked for 24 hours a day for like a month, all right? So here's the analysis. This is what they found. The Shroud image is that of a real human form, of a scourged and crucified man. It is not the product of an artist. So that's pretty, pretty compelling.
And it's not an alien.
And it's not an alien. And then they said there are blood stains. It's composed of hemoglobin, and it gave a positive test for serum albumin, which I assume is some chemical in the blood, right? Yeah. But they said the physical, chemical, and biological, medical circumstances really didn't allow them to go beyond anything. Then it's like it's human blood on a shroud. But here's the bottom line: they carbon dated it, and it came out to be somewhere between 1260 and 1390, which is exactly when the shroud appears in history.
Right. So it's not old enough.
So it's not old enough. And then for the first time, I've never done this. Like I went in and just said, what does it actually say about the burial cloth, right? So listen, here's John 19, verse 40. Taking Jesus down, the two of them wrapped it, Jesus' body, two of them wrapped it with spices in strips of linen. This was in accordance with the Jewish burial custom. Then you go to Luke 24:12. However, Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Bending over, he saw the strips of linen lying by themselves. So the way it worked, did a little research again. When they would bury a person, they would wrap them in strips of linen. They used 50 to 100 pounds of spices. And the only shroud was actually a facial shroud. So like Jews didn't actually use a full body shroud. So it's kind of funny to me. It's like, how did it get this much?
So much heat.
So much heat.
Yeah.
It's like it doesn't even really stand up to basic first century
even
history
the way it's
and practice.
Described in the Gospels.
Even the way it's,
I think the shroud is way bigger than it needed to be, and they probably didn't find any spices that would have been they're all over
that's
the place.
true, and I read that in the article. There were no remnants of spices.
And is it John that says that the face cloth was actually folded up and laid down on the
it was
stone?
So if there would have been imprint, it would have been his face.
Yeah.
Not his full body. So
That's interesting.
there you go.
Sorry, Shroud of Turin people.
Not. Okay.
It would have been cool if it was,
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, it would
I know.
be cool.
but not old enough.
Not old enough.
Yes. Okay, so another question, Olivia Jameson. What made people start to write about Jesus to begin with? How did he tell them to do it, or was it just something they did on their own?
In the book of Hezekiah 1:8, Jesus says, I'm lying. There's no Hezekiah. No, we don't have any record of Jesus commanding, go and write my story down. But here's what I think. I mean, if we're just kind of using some, hypotheticals, is if you see a guy, you live with him, and then you see him crucified, you see him die, you see him buried, and then later on you have breakfast with him on the beach, I'm going to write about it.
Right. That would make a good book.
I want to tell people about this. And these guys, their lives are so radically transformed. It wasn't a new thing to write about profound historic events in that place and time.
In fact, the Jewish people were known by other cultures as the people of the book.
Yeah.
Now, of course, it was scrolls. It's not the way we think of that came on later on in history. But I guess what I'm saying, there was a strong tradition of that sort of literary.
To not lose those Ebenezer moments.
And the interesting thing is about the story of Jesus, it's like, so we've got the 4 Gospels that are in the Bible, and you talked a little bit about this on Sunday, but the reason those 4 Gospels are authoritative is not because they're in the Bible. They were put in the Bible because they were deemed authoritative. So in the 4th century, when the Scripture was officially canonized, and these things had been in circulation, and they'd be considered to be authoritative for a long time. So and
it's important to note, like, there were actually quite a few other Gospels that were being circulated
that didn't
among
make
the
the cut.
churches.
So so there were a bunch of what we call Gnostic Gospels that I'm going to get to that. So in just a second. Okay. So these 4 Gospels, they were deemed authoritative. They were in circulation for a long time before they were officially included in the canon. And the reason something was thought to be authoritative was for 2 reasons. They had criteria. They said, 1, it was written by an apostle or a close associate of an apostle, and 2, when and where it showed up. So there were lots of other Gospels, lots of other people who were compelled to try and write about the story. Right? It wasn't just those 4 guys. You got Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Mary, Gospel of Judas. There's a lot of them that float around. But the problem with those is they showed up way later. And they had some kind of theological fires, contained in there. They weren't really coherent with what the rest of the accepted New Testament authors
they had the
were writing.
appearances of, like, what the kind of language and metaphors and variations that show up in, like, more late legendary work instead of actual, like, eyewitness testimony.
And they showed up so much later. So in other words, if a historicity says, hey, how close can we get to the actual events? How close can we get? Now you have Gospels that have been written roughly within the lifetimes of what would have been eyewitnesses. By Luke, who was an investigative journalist, who is a close companion of the Apostle Paul. You've got Mark, who is a companion of Peter. They believe that he wrote down Peter's story. John, who was an eyewitness apostle, and Matthew, who was an eyewitness apostle. And so the beauty of that is we have 4 different guys who are writing down from 4 different perspectives about the same story, the same life story. And where else do you get that about someone's life and history? You don't get that about the Caesars. You don't get that. I mean, everything was so close to the events that I think the beauty of it is we actually do have 4 different perspectives included in the canon. So anyway, why did they write them down? They wrote it down because it was powerful and important. It was transforming their world at the time.
And it could be because people were asking questions about it. I mean, even Luke saying, I'm writing an orderly account so that you can know that these things were true. And that tells you that there were people asking, was this real? Did this really happen? Just like we do today.
Yeah. Well, he says in the first paragraph of his gospel that there are many have taken it upon themselves to write about these things. Many.
Yeah.
So even in his lifetime, there's a ton of people that were trying to capture this somehow and get it down so they could share it with other people. But he says, I'm going to try and put together an orderly account for you, Theophilus, so that you'll know what happened and that you can believe.
And it also underscores to me the fact that there were so many people writing about Jesus, just the profundity of his life.
Right.
Yeah, because who does that? Some random Jewish dude. Nobody does that.
Yeah, because he's like a poor, uneducated carpenter from a backwater town in the middle of nowhere, you know? And like we talked about last weekend, we've got 18 sources, right? But you look at profoundly important like generals in the room, and they're like be one or two sources about them.
Nobody's wanting to write a biography on me.
Well, yeah, I mean, but how did Jesus somehow require that kind of response where so many people are writing about him?
And the fact that we have record of these things that were within a century, when you talk about the Gaelic Wars or you talk about Homer, I mean, the earliest copies we have are 600, 700, 800 years or more after the events. And we're talking about records that are within 100 years. And clearly the story was in circulation during the lifetime of eyewitnesses. And here's a little trivial fun fact for you. Something to think about. This is one of my favorite things. Here's a date you need to remember. AD 70.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
All right, so in the year AD 70, and this is just for free, for fun, that the Romans, who at about 68 had laid siege to Jerusalem, they were sick of this rebellion in this corner of the empire. It was causing them all kinds of grief. They surround the city basically to try and starve the people out. And they spent 2 years out there in the sun, in the Middle East, miserable about it. And finally, they got sick of it. Titus, who was leading the army, leads them in, and they raze the city. I mean, they tear down the temple. They raze the city. It is absolutely traumatic to the Jews. Now, think about this. Their entire leadership structure is based on Jerusalem. Their religion is based on Jerusalem. They believe that God can only be worshipped appropriately at the temple, that God's manifest presence exists in the temple. Everything about the Jewish world was centered on Jerusalem, and absolutely is obliterated, and Jews are scattered all over the place. There is zero mention of this in the New Testament. None. Nobody bothered to write about it at all. Now think about this, something that would be as scarring to the Jewish soul as the destruction of Jerusalem, and nobody...
And they wrote about other things in history that were much less
traumatic. They wrote about
traumatic.
all kinds of stuff. I mean, Paul makes his way all the way to Rome. They write about all this other stuff. They go out of their way to say, hey, and Rufus was the son of this guy, because those are little hints to tell you, hey, you can go and talk to Rufus, and ask him if this happened, right? That's why they telegraph all this stuff through the Gospels. Not a single mention, and the only reason I mention that is why Jesus predicted that the temple was going to get torn down.
Right.
And if somebody was later on writing about this,
After it happened.
way after it happened,
Circle, underscore, highlight.
AD 90,
it happened.
You could have said, by the way, as the Savior said, Jerusalem was destroyed. Right? Nothing. And honestly, the only logical conclusion you get from that is it hadn't happened yet.
Yeah,
when
it had
these
to be
guys
before
when they wrote all this
before
stuff
70 AD.
Yeah, and so I'm not saying that's conclusive, but it's a pretty powerful thing to think about when you get down to it. So if you ever kind of wonder,
and why is that important? It basically says you have the New
They were
Testament
eyewitnesses.
within 40 years.
right?
Yeah.
So if Jesus dies around 32 to 34, and Jerusalem is destroyed in 70, right? So you got less than 40 years, and the church rises up, makes its way to Rome in that 40 years. This whole idea of everything surfacing as legend, much, much later, people wrote about it and they magnified it like it's some kind of mythical thing, and it just
You don't have a leg to stand
it doesn't stand up.
It doesn't. Well, we should probably wrap it, buddy.
Yeah,
We've almost gone an hour.
we're time. So, real quick, don't miss this Sunday. We are going to be receiving questions via our mobile app. You can search for that, and your app store, search for Westside Family Church. Button right up at the top is submit your questions. And this next Sunday, we're going to be talking about, is God a genocidal maniac? How do we reconcile the Old Testament violence with the New Testament Jesus? You got something to say about that, Troy? Because that's your baby.
Well, I tell you what, it is personally the most challenging question that I have about Scripture.
Yeah.
I can navigate a lot of the typical intellectual, rational debates, but this one is the hardest one for me to personally get a hold of, and so it's ironic that I got assigned to this particular one. And I am I am very excited about the journey this has had me on personally, and I got to tell you, just based on the research and the study that I've done and the travailing in prayer over it, it has caused me to have more confidence and more love for the Scripture than I have ever had. And so I'm excited to get to share, some maybe perhaps new perspectives for people on Sunday.
That's great. That's great. Go ahead and submit your questions via the mobile app, and we'll take a look at those and talk about it on Sunday. We will see you guys then.
Much love. Bye.